Thank you very much. We were very honored to be part of this program. And I do want to say, my name is Douglas. I'm not.
Thank you very much, Douglas.
Yes.
Appreciate you. For the many years that you've dedicated to our lives around the world.
Thank you.
So, Tom, before we start, I want to say thank you to Professor Madhubuti and all that.
Yes. Yes.
Perfect today. And man, you go.
Yeah.
I was leaving out past the sister. It was also 90. Would you
Monica, Alexander.
Thanks for coming out. She looked her daughter off, so I really appreciate both of y'all coming out. I'm 82, knocking the hell out of 83.
Oh, we just gonna start with thanks and origins. So like it's an honor to be here. So maybe I'll start with sharing just a little bit about my origins, which also I think brings in some conversation about you and third world press. So if I were to try to say origins, I would say for me, my origins with writing, with the literary arts, with like performance, starts in the Black church. And so in many ways, that was a kind of foundational space for me to see things that were always more interesting to me as performance than necessarily doxology, right? Like they were these really excessive and extravagant performances of language and song that were inspiring to me, were things that prompted me to think about my own entry points into performance. And so I think that those things definitely, as a young person with family that were a part of a Black Pentecostal tradition, that was something that was just a point of origin for me. But like moving from there, I feel like as I think about the way that my reading took me into things, that my reading was like something that ended up leading me to all these various like points, and in a hunger for poetry, a hunger for things that were speaking to Black experience, a hunger for poetry that was asking something of the world that it was not offering. And I think that for me to find spaces like, initially like in reading folks like Baraka, who in Black art is saying fuck poems, and they're useful, right? That to to be led into the space of reading and learning about operations like Third World Press, which, as I read back in 2005, when I was learning about it, started with $500 at a mimeograph machine, right? Out of an apartment in the South Side of Chicago, and things like that were something that really lit a flame for me as someone to think about the possibility of what was done in that period. Reading about folks like Dudley Randall, who Melba Boyd in her biography talks about how, like, you know, framing like the period of 1945 to 65 that like only had 39 books of Black poetry published nationally. But that in 65 onward, as you see the emergence of broadside press and third world press, that you see this dramatic shift in what actually ends up being published. So I think that those things for me were a big part of at least what laid a foundation, and not to laid a foundation for what I could see myself doing, both as a writer and as someone who wanted to build institutions, wanted to think about institution building for Black folks, which I think is something that I want to get into. So that being said, I would love to hear some of your own origin stories that you've been asked.
Thank you very much, and it's good to hear your story. I think most Black people, many Black people came out of church, and Black people like myself ran from the church. Primarily because I did not see at the time I came up, and my grandfather, step-grandfather, was Baptist minister. And I'm not going there, but the point, and he had store furniture. So we were really grassroots. But for me, my mother, who worked in the sex trade, very beautiful woman who never had a chance. She was murdered at the age of 34, and basically left my sister and I. My sister was a year and a half younger than I. Had her first child at 14, second child at 16, third child at 18. By the time she was 27, she had 6 children, 5 different fathers. And I, because my mother was a reader, and she had asked me to go to the Detroit Public Library, check out Black Boy, 14 years old. But the story there, Chaun, is that I refused to go because I hated myself. I hated my color, I hated everything about me because I was ignorant of me. And if you don't know who you are, anybody can name you. And that's how I became Donnell Lee. She insisted, and I went to the White Library in Detroit, Michigan, which is the main library on Woodward Avenue. And then I went to go to a white librarian and ask for a book with Black in the title, authored by a Black writer who I understood was critical of white American, because I hated myself. So I did go to the library and found the book on the shelf and went to an people section of the library and sat down and began to read. And for the first time in my life, I was reading words, sentences, paragraphs, chapters that were not an insult to my own person. So I read Black Boy lesson, I read half the book that day in the library, checked it out, and went home and stayed up and finished the book that night. I read Black Boy in less than 24 hours. And I gave it to my mother the next day and kissed her on the cheek and said, thank you. And went back to the library and checked out everything that you're writing. And one book which many of you may not have heard of was his first book of essays titled White Man Listen. And that book of essays had really a book on psychology. essay on psychology. But the major essay for me was a book on Negro writing. And so this was obviously in the 50s. And as I read his essay on Negro writing, I took notes and was determined to go through all the writers which he had referenced in that essay. And one of the major writers he had referenced was Chester Hines. And my mother read Chester Hines. And so that was my start. But my living circumstances were horrible. I never had a father in my life. But men, and I was a boy at that time, I was growing up too early, trying to deal with the life we had, but it hurt my sister more. Because I was not old enough to protect her.
Take your time.
And so she was impregnated by the local gang leader, about 21 years old. And so once she told me and our mother, I went looking for him. He's 6'1", 131 pounds, without walking skeleton. I used to carry a lead pipe and a belt. So I found the guy, walked up to him and hit him, before he saw me. He went down. But the problem is he got up. And of course, he and his men pretty much almost put me in the hospital. And when I got back home, my mother whooped me for getting worse. So we were living in a dysfunctional life. And reading brought me to life. It gave me answers where we did not have answers ourselves. And so my mother was murdered. So I'm on my own. My sister is pretty much on her own. And I leave Detroit to come to Chicago to live with a stranger who was my father. And he was in the underworld. He never worked for white folks. He ran a policy wheel, which predates, lottery. And he ran night joints. And so that life, I could see, was just destroying him. So I'm probably one of the few black men that you'll ever meet. Never drank, never smoked, never been high. Even spent 3 years in the military. But the literature saved my life. Art saved my life. It was the literature, then the visual art. Well, actually, it was the music first, because the musicians, they always had the answer, but they couldn't put it into practice. The musicians, in any case, could, go subsurface in terms of the culture, but very few of them were able to make a living without depending upon people who hated them. And I was a trumpet player for a while. I had a Martin flugelhorn, and it's another whole story behind it. But getting back to the books, getting back to the literature, I found myself stationed at Fort Sheridan, Illinois, at 19 years old. And there was an ad in the newspaper about the Ebony Museum of Negro History. And so I went from Fort Sheridan, went to 3806 South Michigan Avenue. And then you saw this house, which was Margaret Burroughs and Charlie Burroughs' home. and knocked on the door. The man by the name of Eugene Feldman answered the door. He was a white man. He was Jewish. And I thought I was in the wrong place. And so as I turned to leave, he called me back and said, "Yeah, man, wait a minute, did you want to see the museum?" I said, "I was looking for Mrs. Burroughs." He said, "Come on in." Eugene Feldman had been driven out of the South from, I think it was Alabama, I'm not sure, one of the southern states. And he was a historian. We became, pretty close friends. But what happened, he took me to the kitchen because the museum was on the first floor. And then in the basement, they were developing there also. This was in the early days. And I walked into the kitchen and Margaret Burroughs is working on a linoleum cut. She's a first-class visual artist. Okay. She taught at one of the major high schools in Chicago at that time. And so I'm standing looking at her, staring at her, and she said, "What do you want, boy?" She's the first Black woman I saw that night. It's 1962. And I said, "I'm in the military, I'm fighting all the time with these Neanderthals. And I don't have nobody I can talk to. I'm reading all this literature." And I was reading close to a book a day at that time. And I would write a 250-word essay on each book I read. And she said, "Go upstairs and talk to my husband." So I go upstairs and there's a big kind of conference table with a library up there. And this man sitting at the table writing and taking notes and, drinking what I thought was water. And he said, "Come on in, young man, have a seat." And he said, "You want something to drink?" I said, "I'll take some water." He said, "That's vodka." This is Charlie Burroughs. Charlie Burroughs was partially raised in the USSR. He spoke Russian fluently. And so he kind of took me under his wing, sit down talking. And that's when Du Bois and Paul Robeson and others like that became into my life. In fact, if you read Yellow Black, which is the first 21 years of my life, in Yellow Black, there's a picture of Du Bois and Robeson. And under the picture, I adopted them as my grandfather. In fact, W.B. Du Bois' birthday on February 23rd, the same day I was. But what I saw there impacted me in such a way because they were building the museum in their home. John H. Johnson, who had started Ebony Jet, other magazines, threatened to sue them if they did not change the name. And that's how they changed the name from Ebony Museum of Negro History to DuSable. One. So that's how I met. Malcolm was my man. Especially all of us young brothers who were coming up at that time, ready, especially myself coming out of the military, ready for war, and fighting these white guys all the time. Almost every week I'm fighting somebody. And almost got put out of the military. I'm not going into that, but the point is that when Malcolm was assassinated, Dudley Randall, who had started started Broadside Press in '62, came up to Chicago to enlist the services of Margaret Burroughs to putting out a book on Malcolm. And the title of the book was for Malcolm. And that's when I first met Dudley Randall, because now I'm volunteering at the museum. I'm doing everything that needs to be done that I can do. Basically from mopping floors to giving lectures and tours of the museum, et cetera, anything I can do. And so Dudley, very gracious, serious brother. And I asked him, "Would you look at my poem on Malcolm?" And he did. And he published it in the book. And so he and Margaret Burroughs edited the book. But Dudley said, gave him my second book. I published Think Black myself. And I gave him the second book, Black Pride, and so would you please consider this book? And so he took it back to Detroit and called me in a week, which is highly unusual, and said, I want to publish your book. Can I write the introduction to your book? Now, you don't understand what that means. That means a great deal for a senior poet to say yes and then publish the book and then want to write the introduction to them. Say, can you come to Detroit and sign the contract? It was interesting. He didn't say, I'm going to send the contract to you. I want you to come to Detroit. And there's a reason for that, because going to Detroit, I saw how he was building Broadside Press in his home. So now I got two examples of senior brothers and sisters building institutions in their home. I said, I got this. I got this. All right. And so I didn't sign the contract. I shook his hand. I said, you know, we don't need a contract. We're good. We're good. And went back to Chicago. Book came out. Now, by the time I had met Gwendolyn Brooks, who eventually became my culture. Culture mother. I met Gwendolyn Brooks in 1967 in a church on the south side of Chicago, teaching Blackstone Rangers writing. She was working with Oscar Brown Jr., the great Oscar Brown Jr. And so Oscar, who was always cool, and he's working on this new Opportunity Knocks. That was the name of the play he's working on with his wife. And Gwen is, well, Miss Brooks, is teaching these young Blackstone Rangers, men and women, writing skills. So I and some other poets from the Organization of Black American Culture, OBASI, came down in Saturday. And we sit in the workshop. And after she finished, she came over to greet us. And then the other poets left, so I stayed there behind and talking to her. I gave her my first book, Think Black. Now she looked at Think Black. The cover of Think Black is white, and in the center of Think Black was the continent of Africa. And they had Think Black. This is 1967. I'm not done Think Negro. All right. Think Black, then Donnell Lee. And she put the book to her chest and said, young man, I'm gonna read this tonight. Which she did. And the next day she called me and said, can we talk? And that started a 33-year family war. And because I did not have a mother, she took it, she took on the task. And it's interesting that we moved her workshop to her home, and she brought in other writers. Other writers came to her workshop who were part of the OBASI Writers Workshop, who was headed by the great Howard W. Fuller. Howard W. Fuller was he was the editor of Negro Digest, which became Black World Magazine. And the important thing about Negro Digest, which was one of the magazines from Johnson Publishing Company, it was published every month, and they published 50,000 copies. So Howard W. Fuller was a major, not only inspired person who inspired all of us, but he was a writer, primary prose writer, and he had traveled everywhere. He knew everybody. And so obviously we became very close. I mean, so when you look at my mentors in terms of how I became who I am, it's basically El-Hajj Dick Al-Shaban, Malcolm X, Margaret and Charlie Burrow, Dudley Randall, O.W. Fuller, Margaret Ann Simon, one of the major educators in the world. Gwendolyn Brooks, I mentioned O.W. Fuller. So my whole maturation was starting a publishing company primarily because I made a decision that I am not going to publish a book with the people who hate me. That is not going to happen. That is not going to happen. And I knew that I could write poetry. There's so much, son, but the key point is this. Gwen and I became so close, we talked her into, as well as others, but I was a major voice, to leading Harper and Row to come into Broadside Press. And the first book she published at Broadside Press was Riot. And Jeff Downsend did the, kind of cover for it, who was a great visual artist out of Chicago also. And so she left Harper and Row, and Paula Gettings, who did the book on When Will We Enter, and the book on Ida B. Wells, came to Chicago to recruit me for, not Random House, but Random House. And I told Paula, it is nowhere in the world I'm leaving Broadside Press, going to Random House, but I've never been to New York. Because could you bring me to New York and show me around Random House? And she knew I'm not coming. But she did. And I'll never forget going through Random House. She took me down to the senior editor, the black editor, who was there at that time at Random House. And I walked into her office. She said, Don, we're waiting on you. I said, Tony, I'm not coming. Tony Morrison. Tony had not published the Bluest Eye yet. And so she understood. It was not, nothing negative at all. She understood. I said, I cannot. Gwen has left Harper and Row. She's with Broadside. I'm with Broadside. We're trying to build Broadside. And I started a Third World Press, and we're trying to, she said, I understand. And so I'll just kind of, there's so much, son. There's so much. And so we started in our basement apartment, moved to, what happened?
Can I ask you to pause, because you've given us a lot of different portals to move through. So any one of those could be their own. I appreciate so much of what you had to say and the vulnerability that you said. Okay, so I feel like I'm hearing the portal of Margaret and Chaun world, right? And the DuSable Museum. And the way that not only does that museum run out of the house, but also seeing the way that Dudley Randall was running Broadside Press out of his Detroit home, on a librarian salary, right? Right. And we're always funding these things independently on our own in this way, right? Absolutely. And so to see that kind of offshoot of work, which is happening without some form of permission, right? It's not like someone saying you can permissively go and do this. There wasn't a need for a kind of outside authorization of you go and are able to do this by this permit or these various kinds of bureaucratic lines of doing the thing. It was, I go and I do the thing. And that was something also that was quite important for me to see and learn and read about in that distant fashion. But I'd also like to maybe slow it down and look at two things. So you saw Charles Burroughs' desk full of books, his notes, And in my reading, like I learned about Charles Burroughs' classical political economy, learning of his own, right? Like, and Marxism.
Right.
And I'm curious about what he was able to pass down to you in his own kinds of learning. Like you speak about, like if you could enter into not just like Charles and Margaret Burroughs and what you're learning from that space, because it seems like you had the military in which you were reading a book a day, and you were doing this independent learning already, right? Like you were already out there doing the reading, doing that work. But then you have the space of coming into the museum and learning under the auspices and tutelage of Charles and Margaret Burroughs, but then also like thinking about Gwendolyn Brooks as a great poet educator. I think of Gwendolyn Brooks, June Jordan, Tony K. Barr. These are like, to me, great writer educators. Like,
Well,
and I want to,
June Jordan and Tony, they're my contemporaries.
for sure. And I'm asking more so along the line, like, and the reason why I say great writer educators and specifically citing these people is that in terms of folks who I learn from often, I don't necessarily think that when we're given that education of like Black writers, sometimes there's this kind of hyphenated or the space in which we think of the Black writer and not necessarily the Black educator. And I think that Gwendolyn Brooks was able to flow in both. Like Gwendolyn Brooks was a fantastic writer and she was a phenomenal educator. And I'm saying that because I think of June Jordan in the same way. I think of Tony K. Barr in the same way, especially as you think about those kinds of offshoots of in-home learning, the kind of in-home learning that Tony K. Barr did in her writing workshops and similar with June Jordan and Gwendolyn Brooks. And so I think thematically I'm connecting those things. But if you would be so kind as to take a minute to talk about the way that Gwendolyn Brooks as an author educator and Charles and Margaret Burroughs as folks who were doing this cultural work in the institution of their museum out of their home, how they were able to, or what specifically outside of even just as an institution, what this did for you and seeing that as an example, if you could kind of fill in some of those pieces of that education in time.
Well, Charlie Burroughs never took on the task of quote unquote educating me. He as well as Margaret was so busy trying to get the museum going. And so I fell into their structure.
You were a curator then,
Right. Oh, well, assistant curator. He sent me down to the art museum in Chicago to learn some nonsense. But what I learned from Charlie and from Margaret was tenacity and not asking for permission. And Margaret was basically one of the first persons I met who was totally African-centered, even though she was left to the bone. See, Charlie Burroughs had been raised partially in the USSR, and he spoke Russian fluently. And we would have arguments. I'm a nationalist, I'm a Black nationalist, And what I cared about Russia, you can put on the back of a match film, nothing. But they attracted the Black left and Black people who were very serious about our struggle. And I would never in any way take away from their contribution to our people. DuSable Museum was the first one in the country. This is the first one, number one. All right. And it's in Chicago. And Chicago at that time, see, we were all part of this giant struggle. And Chicago was becoming the center of Black independent institutions, or independent Black institutions. Yeah. And the DuSable Museum led the way. And quiet as it kept, I give credit to also to Johnny Johnson in terms of Ebony and Jet and so forth, even though I led 2 boycotts against Johnny Johnson. One, the first one was when he was in the old headquarters on Michigan Avenue also. But we wanted to change the name. A Negro Digest of Black World. So I and other writers and visual artists and musicians, we picketed the headquarters, and Mr. Johnson came out and, you know, "Yeah, come inside. We want to talk to you." So I'm the spokesperson, and I said we wanted 4 things. One, you got to change the name of Negro Digest to Black World Magazine. Yes. 2, you got to stop advertising these skin color whiteness. And 3, yes. 3, you've got to have a much more positive coverage of Africa. Yes. And the 4th thing, you got to begin to support the art institutions in Chicago. All right. And even across, you know, around the world, but mainly in Chicago. And Val Gray Ward was a great actress herself. She was the boss of Black poetry, who certainly come out of Chicago. And she had started a Kumba workshop. See, in Chicago, you had all these women, in many cases, starting these institutional structures. So Alvin Joan Brown had the ETA, Val Gray Ward had Kumba workshop. And so she got some of the first grants from Johnny Shin. And so if you're looking at those persons, institution builders, they're all critical in terms of the Chicago. AECM was starting at that time. Mohawk Richard, you know, Abrams, they had, you know, basically these young, serious musicians coming together, pooling their talents, having one of the greatest bands to come out. I mean, these are all these musicians, just like our brothers here. They are on their own at one level, but decided to say, okay, we're gonna come together and build this collective. And it is one of the major collectives in the world. And so you had Chicago was like the center of all this activity. Music, visual art, the wall of respect, that's Chicago. Yeah. So getting back to, you know, my minor role in all of this, in terms of Gwendolyn Brooks, Gwen lived in a wood frame home about the size of this platform. 7428 South Evans Avenue, Chicago. And she moved the workshop to her home, and every week we'll meet in her home. I did one book on Gwendolyn Brooks, and in this book, taught by women, this is my last little book, poems as resistant language. They were selected, but you know, Black women talk about women. I'm just going to take one segue, but just say a couple of words about my wife. My wife and I, Dr. Carol D. Lee, you can look up Dr. Carol D. Lee. We met in struggle in Chicago for education, and we came together and started the Institute of Positive Education. And in the Institute of Positive Education, we started these schools. New Concept School was our preschool, still going. The Leadership Arts Academy, K-8, still going. The Barbara Ann Sizemore Academy, K-8, still going. We only half a block in Chicago. And what it took to get that property and to build it, okay, would take a long time to talk about. But I met my wife. She was working on her master's degree at the University of Chicago and writing on the Black Arts movement. And so she wanted to interview me. So she invited me to this after school program that she was working on at that time. and to read poetry, which I came. And that's, when I introduced myself. And she quite liberally would tell everybody, well, you got my name and telephone number, and you got all the other sisters' names and telephone numbers too. I tell her, I called you. See, the poet always got to come back. Because, Gwendolyn Brooks is teaching at Columbia College. She got this better position at New York University, I believe. And she told the president of Columbia College, I want Don Lee to take my place. I'm 25, all right? I just got a 2-year degree. And he said, well, he needs at least a graduate degree, at least undergraduate, it'll be 4 years. And she said, no, I want him to teach my course. So the president of Columbia College said, I need to talk to him. It's 30 minutes. So, 30 minutes turned into 3 hours. I got the job. No doubt about that. I've never met a white person know more about my culture than Hopi. And I've been in 4 continents and around the world. And so I got that job. So that started my teaching at the college level. Right. So what happened? We're in struggle now. We're trying to get Black studies started all over the country. And the students at Cornell, reading Don Lee and all that thing. And they want a poet in residence at Cornell University. All right. And they said they want Don Lee. So I go in for the interview and stuff like that. And so they said, this is who we want. So I said, okay. He's first Black poet in Ivy League University. This is 1968. About 27 now. But the point is that the professors who run the English department say, well, we're not going to credit the poet. I said, well, I'm not coming. Why? I got a job. Why would I leave Chicago and come way out here in cold ass, upstate New York, and not, of course, not be accredited? So I said, I'm not coming. Well, the students took over. They had, ready to take over the campus anyway at Cornell. So the guy, the chairman of the department called me. I mean, the guy shaking and everything. Would you call me professor and everything, all that stuff. Would you please come in for an interview with the English department? So you got him and 4 other old ass professors going to interview me about my knowledge base around, can I teach this course on African American history? I'm ready for this. You know what? I just spent 3 years in the Army. All right, I done been dealing with these Neanderthals on my young life. So I come in there, man. I got my Army stuff on. I'm out of the Army, but I got my fatigues and all this stuff on me. Going in and got at least 4, 5 guys sitting around the table. This is funny. That's why I need to tell you. So they started the line of questioning around Black literacy. So the questioning basically is around Black Boy, Native Son, Invisible Man. Come on now. So I said, okay, I'm listening to myself. I said, okay, I'm gonna get this job. I don't have any problem with that. But I'm gonna shut them up quick. Okay? Second round questions. The white boy asked me the question, about invisible, not invisible man, maybe you and I don't know what it was, but anyway, I answered the question, then I asked him a question. Not necessarily about the same book he asked me about one of the author's other books. You see people who just could not answer the question. So get around to the 4th question. Because the other ones, they just mumbling and stuff. And so the guy asked me, a question, and I said, well, It's a very important book, which many of you probably haven't, dealt with, but the Uncle Tom's Cabin by Richard Wright. Uncle Tom's Children by Richard Wright. Now, he came back and said, "No, young man, you mean Uncle Tom's Cabin by Beecher Stowe?" So I said, "No, I'm talking about Uncle Tom's Children by Richard Wright. It's a book of short stories." And I went down in my bag and pulled it out. The guy turned 15 different colors. And then went to the chair department. And it's time for him to ask you the second question. He just said, "Hey, welcome to Cornell." I mean, each person from June Jordan to Paula Gettings to Toni Morrison. These are my contemporaries. I mean, I can, because there are always stories around all this stuff. But I just want to just say, when I'm talking about my wife is brilliant. And I tell Black men all over the country, all over the world, marry women smarter than you. If you marry women smarter than you, this won't last. And that's what I did. And I'm not lying. My wife, so she interviewed me for her master's thesis. Got a degree from the University of Chicago, did an undergraduate degree from the University of Illinois. And then we struggling, building these institutions and stuff like that. And I left Cornell because I'm not staying there with these racist Neanderthals. Come back to Chicago, get a job at UIC, position there. And I got a call from Howard University. Now check this out. I'm lying about going to Howard selling magazine subscriptions. Okay, going through Illinois, and this before I went into the military. After I graduated from high school, I'm lying. I'm working my way through Howard and boom, 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 all this stuff. And so I got a call from the dean, with provost at Howard, Andrew Billington, Dr. Andrew Billington. He called me and said, "Hey, Don, look." I said, "You don't know me." Call me Don. Steve Henderson. We started this new institute where Steve Henderson is the director. He wants you to be the port in residence here. And he wants the great writer John Oliver Killens to be the fiction writer. And I got a whole story with John too. John Oliver Killens was one of the great fiction writers, and he was an essayist also. But he had started one of the first conferences on Black literature at Fisk University. That's how I got the job at Cornell, because I went to speak at his conference, and the dean was at the conference. I'm not get off the track, but anyway, they actually come and be the writer in resident at Howard University. And so I said, "Okay, I'll come out and talk about it." So two things there. One, I get to Dr. Dozy's office. He said, "You read this book?" I said, "What is the book?" So I pick it up, and it tells the book, The Destruction of Black Civilization. Published by a white company out of Iowa. Right? I said, "Well, I'm going to get the book today." And I said, "Well, where's the writer?" He said, "He teaches here. Dr. Chancellor Williams." I said, "Well, okay." He said, "Well, are you going to take the job or what?" So I said, "Yeah, I got one condition. I mean, they pay me full professor salary, everything I want." Okay. So I said, "I just got one. I got to have this because we're doing this work in Chicago. I need to commute." I read Alvin Toffler's Future Shop. And he had professors commuting from one city to the next city, maybe even working at 2 universities. And so I said, I need to commute between Chicago and DC. But I'm not going to move. Like when I moved to Ithaca, New York, I moved all my books, everything. That's not gonna happen. No. And he said, "Are you serious, young man? We got major scholars and writers here at Howard. They live in DC. You know who Sterling Brown is?" He said, "Yeah, I've been sitting on his class. I know who he is." And so that read Sterling Brown. So Sterling was there. He was teaching at Howard. I said, "But I cannot. I got to build Third World Press. We got to build our schools at this time. We got to build our, you know." He said, "No." I got him walked out. Before I got out the door, his secretary came out, Professor Dr. Billings want to speak to you. Got back up to the office, and the doctor said, "You tried pretty hard, Barbara. I don't know who you've been talking to, but we found some money." So 3 years of commuting between Chicago and DC every week. He said, "You got to get an apartment here," which is a mistake for me. I mean, too many women. Look, the women outnumber Black men in DC like 3.5 to 1. You don't need no apartment in Anyway, 3 years, me commuting back and forth every week, turned into 8 years. In those 8 years, I'm writing, doing music. I did 2 albums. Jerry Allen, the great Jerry Allen, musician, composer, pianist. He's on one of the first album, Rise with the Summer. And I worked with local musicians, some of them who were in my class at Howard. So I'm doing everything, going back and forth. I did my first, second, third trip to Africa. Met Leopold Senghor in Senegal. That's another story. When the president of a nation who was one of the creators of Niggertude asked you to sign my book, he wanted me to sign my book for him. All right? That's embarrassing. I'm saying, well, Mr. President, you know, you taught me. I'm saying, I'm here because of you. I need to be bringing my books from my hotel for you to sign. And the guy is serious, all right? Monsieur, would you please sign? So I'm just saying that Howard, my first trip to Africa, Howard, it's just too much stuff.
I'm gonna try and turn a different corner here.
Okay.
So maybe this will be the last question that I ask, and we'll maybe open it up for folks here to ask their own questions. But I think that there is like this creative tension that I hold with the Black arts movement in the 60s and moving forward, right? Like, and I think that creative tension is maybe around how we conceive of Blackness, right? Like, and so is Blackness the pure ideal where there is a particular kind of maybe rigidity around its form and its performances, and or is there maybe some other kind of path of which it rubs up against? Now I'll say this, like I think that in terms of things that I see out of the Black arts movement, there's so much to contend with in the period, it feels like, right? There's the Black exploitation films, right? Like there is the kind of cultural production that is denigrating to a particular Black image. And I sometimes I wonder though, that if in response to that continuum of production, there's a kind of creation of a pure Black figure that doesn't hold enough flexibility to hold all of us, right? And I'm thinking maybe about like potentially like poems about Diana Ross, right? And the conceptions of like how she goes mad or something, like, right? Like, or thinking about how does that rub up against, or as you think about, like, you know, these kinds of teachings through Gwendolyn Brooks and others, like, is there a tension that you hold, right? Like, because I feel like my own tension is about the pure Black ideal, right? Like, in my own set of commitments to maybe more along the lines of a Richard Eichmann, like Black Fantastic, right? Like, which is, I think, a little bit perhaps more flexible, right? So I wonder about that. That's the tension that I hold as a writer, and I wonder how you think about that.
Well, saying Down to Go Mad, which is one of my poems. All right. I knew Down and Wrong. It's from Detroit. Motown was right down the street. All right. And so she did go mad. All right. And I say that, and I don't say it in a way to disparage her, other than she didn't know. See, if you don't know who you are, anybody can name you. Right? Let me get back to that. So when we talk about blackness or Black, we have to talk about not only the color. You and I are different colors, but we're close to being the same color. Same with the sister here, this brother here, he's a little darker than I am. All right. So when you look talking about blackness at one level, in terms of the first level is color, you got all these Black people in there. All right now. But the second level is culture. So when you talk about blackness, you're not only just talking about the color, you're talking about culture also. I can walk into your home right now, not even knowing you. And as soon as I walk into your home, it tells me everything I need to know about you. Number one, is it clean? Number two, what's on your wall? Are the images on your wall the best images of your family, your community, or Black visual art? Then I'm going to your bookcase if you got a damn bookcase. What are you reading? That defines you. All this goes into blackness, all right? Then I'm going to see your music. What kind of music you listen to? Streaming or albums? You know, I got about 5,000 albums, all right, I'm saying? But I had been collecting albums since I was 15 years old. And then I'm looking at great Black music, booty call music. That defines you. And then I'm going to essentially your bedroom where you and your lover or whatever, your wife or whatever it be, you're looking at the movies at night, the Black exploitation, but you're looking at everything else. So I'm looking at the brown paper bag movies that are under your bed. What are you looking at? That defines you. Then I'm going to your children's room. What's on their wall? Doc Vader, Mickey Mouse, and Donald Duck, and you wonder why we crazy. I'm serious about this. We run 3 schools in Chicago, over 800 students in an African-centered education, teaching our babies to love themselves first and foremost. And nobody's greater than them. And you are Black. Your people of African ancestry. And if you don't know that, then that's the problem. We didn't walk on water to get to this nation. These Neanderthals raped us from a continent. Not just a country, a continent. Brought us here, and we lost over 1/3 of our people in the voyage. If you don't know that, then you don't know. And so the people who came here and took this bad boy annihilated millions and millions of indigenous people. They didn't ask permission. They came in and just started wiping people off the earth. And so this is the settler colony that has worked. All right. And so when you look at Australia, look at New Zealand, look at South Africa, come on now. White people less than 9% of the world's population. You wouldn't know that. Because they have since controlled the communication networks from social media and everything else. So you got this criminal president, and I'm serious about this. The whole criminal family running this country. Leon Musk, a damn South African.
Yes.
You look at the people who started Fox News and started bought the Wall Street Journal. This clown is from Australia. Murdoch. So you got 2 foreigners coming in here having more influence than all Black people. You know what I'm saying? all the indigenous people. Don't talk to me about being black. All right. There's no wavering here. I'm not confused. I'm not confused at all. And so I can deal with all these writers, and I never lie. And so here's Gwendolyn Brooks right here. We published 14 of her books. And one of her major books that we published is her collected poems. What's the title? Black. All right. So I'm serious about this stuff. There's no confusion here. All right. And that's one of the problems I have with higher education. And one of the problems that we have in terms of the brothers and sisters come through institutions like this and others, and they come back thinking they're going to teach us something. When I went to Iowa, I had to go to Iowa to get a graduate degree because when I left Iowa, no one wanted to hire me. You know what the reason they didn't hire me? Because I had published a book titled Enemies, The Clash of Races. I beat white people up. Beat them up. But I beat them up using their language, using their documentation and everything else. All right. But they wouldn't hire me. Say, you don't have a graduate degree. The great writer, Darwin T. Turner. Some of you may know of him. He's deceased now, obviously. He was head of the African Studies Department at Iowa, University of Iowa. So my wife, by that time, she was getting ready to go back and get a PhD. My wife did a PhD at the University of Chicago in 3 years, dissertation in hand. When she finished her dissertation, and people at Northwestern knocking on the door, coming to teach here. And so she retired from Northwestern University. But she was the head of the Biden's National Initiative on Education. She was the chairman of that whole initiative. That's wild. Wow. Look her up. Harold D. He bad. So when so this whole question, oh yeah, okay, so I got through culture, all right? So the next level of blackness is not only color, culture, then consciousness. You get the consciousness from the culture. So if the culture is working for you, if it is teaching you about your people, where they came from, where they are now, etc., then you're good. Because your culture is going to give you a consciousness to the point where you can stand up and talk to and deal with anybody. I'm not standing in no line backing nobody. What for? Okay? And so the question becomes, what have you created? Why are you here? I'm not here to populate the corners. And in fact, there's an essay in Black Men where corners made for Black men to stand on. There's an essay in Black Men Obviously Single Dangerous. And Black Men Obviously Single Dangerous never been reviewed by any serious scholars. 250,000 copies sold. Right? Because when you read the book, you say, this is me. You know, and so my point is that so you got color, culture, consciousness, and today we got zip code. That's what I'm talking about. So when I talk to students, I go any place and you know, I don't have to read no damn notes. This is my life. Okay, that's why I'm a poet. All right, that's why he's a musician. This is our lives. And so when you know this is authentic, and so we talk about say black exploitation movies. I wrote reviews of these movies and put them in Black World magazine, and got beat up because some of them I thought were just junk, and I said, all right. But my point always is, and I wanted to say something about Gwendolyn Brooks here. I'm gonna read a poem by Gwendolyn Brooks. I've read the book on Gwendolyn Brooks, but this is one of the first poems I read when Gwen, I think this is a poem of 70. Oh, this is the first poem. I wrote this and it appeared in my third book, Don't Cry, Scream. Don't Cry, Scream came out in 1969. And because when I was at Cornell, David Loren, who was a writer for Ebony, somehow got Mr. Johnson to send him to Cornell to do an article on the first Black poet in residence at an Ivy League university, Donnell Lee. The article appeared in March of 1969. And that put me on the map internationally. And so when Don't Cry Scream came out, which this poem was the first poem in the book that I wrote on Gwendolyn Brooks, and Gwendolyn Brooks wrote the introduction to the book. The book sold 75,000 copies. 75,000. And the check said, Dudley Randall was going to write to me. I said, keep it. My wife nor I have ever taken a check or money from the institutions that we built. All the royalties I received from my books go back to Third World Press. Why? Because I worked for the enemies of the world in order to keep our stuff going. Okay. And so this is the first poem in the book, Gwendolyn Brooks. I haven't read this in a while, so I might make some mistakes. She doesn't wear costume jewelry. And she knew that Walt Disney is making a fortune off false eyeliner. And that Time magazine is the authority on the Negro. Her makeup is total real. A Negro English instructor called her a fine Negro poet. A white critic said she's a credit to the Negro race. Somebody else called her a pure Negro writer. Johnny May, who was a senior in high school, said she and Langston are the only Negro poets we read in school. I can understand her. Pee Wee used to carry one of her poems around in his back pocket. The one about being cool. That was before Pee Wee was cool by a cop's warning shot. Into the 60s, a word was born, Black. And with Black came poets. And from the poets, ballpoints came Black, double Black, purple Black, blue Black, red Black, the Black day before yesterday. Blacker than Black, ultra Black, super Black, Black Black, yellow Black, nigger Black, white man Black, blacker than you ever be. 1/4 Black, unblack, cold Black, clear Black. My mama's blacker than your mama. Pimple Black, fall Black, so Black we can't even see you. Black on Black and Black, Black, technically Black, man tan Black, winter Black, cold Black, 360 degrees Black, cold Black, midnight Black, Black when it's convenient. Rusty Black, moon Black, star Black, summer Black, electron Black, spaceman Black, shoe shine Black, gym shoe Black, underwear Black, ugly Black, Aunt your mama Black, Uncle Ben's rice Black, Willie Bless Black, Black is people Black, I just discovered Black, Negro Black, unsubstance Black. And everywhere the Lady Negro poet appeared, the poets were there. They listened and questioned and went home feeling uncomfortable, unsound, and so untogether. They read and reread and wrote and rewrote and came back the next time to tell the Lady Negro poet how beautiful she was and how she had helped them. And she came back with how necessary they were and how they helped her. The poets walked, and a space filled the vacuum between them and the Lady Negro poet. You can hear one of the Black poets say, "Bruh, they've been calling that sister by the wrong name."
Well, he was like, "Turn out your clothes." The frogs.
I can run this microphone around to people who want to, if they have a question. Yes, Honorary, you make me come all the way.
I'll meet you halfway.
Oh, yeah. My books are being sold out front by Brother Ezra, my cultural son here in Minneapolis. He has been so helpful in terms of not only helping to make this happen, but also to take care of me while I'm here. 82 years old, he needs somebody to still take care of you. So he's been taking care of me. And he has he is the only writer. This book here just came out. It actually will be published into Tuesday next. For Gaza's children, Black, brown, and Jewish writers and poets speak out. And it's edited by Mark Lamont Hill, Haki R, Madhubuti, and Keith Gilliam. And so Ezra he's the only other writer that has two pieces in the book. He has a prose piece and he has a piece of poetry. The only other person that has two pieces in the book is me. But he has a Go ahead, Tom.
That story you told about when you was being interviewed by all those white professors,
Right.
you just started pulling out books. Made me realize like we are nowhere near as well read as we need to be at all. I mean, when I'm around my peers, sometimes like, man, I read so much more than them. Like maybe I'm well read. Then I hear this story. I was like, man, I don't know nothing. If I can't pull a weapon out of my bag, if I can't pull a book out of my bag and use that as a weapon, I'm not there yet. So I wanted to ask you though, like about like reading strategies, like how you like build up a routine of reading regularly, both like books and journalism, like especially in this modern age.
Thanks for the question. What's your name, son?
Exactly.
Okay. That's right. You wrote a book yesterday on science.
Yep. I got another one for you.
So, young Xavier, you're where you need to be. You're here. So you start your mission wherever you are. And I met you like yesterday evening, after university. And so my essay in this book, and we had to be very careful because we did not want to at any serious level be accused of being anti-Semitic. And that's why we got Jewish writers that one of them. And so my essay is titled Dare to Accurately Name the Horror of Gaza Genocide. And I open up with two poems. If We Must Die, McCall McKay. And the other poem is If I Must Die, by Rifat Ellery, who was the Palestinian poet who was killed in December of 23. And so what happened when they killed him, they killed our babies. These are our babies too. As are the Israeli babies. They're all our babies. Okay. But now you have these Zionists, these murderous Zionists, and understand that most Jews are not Zionists. Killing these babies. And so that's what brought about the book. But in my essay, talking about books now, there's a bibliography from my essay, right after the essay, the references. And there's 1, 2, 3, 4 pages of reference. And the reason, when I started seriously reading at 14 years old, and now willing to go to the library, I said, where can I get books where I don't have to necessarily go to the library? And other places use bookstores. In fact, I'm doing a book now on writing and used bookstore. Okay. So to answer your question, Malcolm X, L.I.G. Kashabah, you never saw him out without reading material. Every time you saw Malcolm, he had the best newspapers there under. And I just took that as a message. Is that if you don't know, you can't do it. And one of the real problems in our community is that we have ignorant people talking about how ignorant other people are. And Black people have to understand at one level that our leadership is not our leadership because they're not leading us in a place where you got 2.5 million brothers and sisters lined up in these prisons. And that's what Black men is about. How do we start? But read every day. And the phone is not the answer. Books. And build a library. You can build a library, use books. Think about it. And then whatever you read and whatever you're doing, share with other brothers and sisters. Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you.
Haki, they're not words that I can come up to thank you. You made a major contribution to Black people all over the world. You know. Now, you and I have been passing one another here and there for over 50 years. You know, since I don't know how many places I've seen you. I don't know how many lectures I've heard from you. But you are a true, real. You need to take that kind of seriously. But as you were talking, it was like a kaleidoscope. But many of those people you mentioned, I met, not know them as well as you. But Gwendolyn Brooks, I introduced her to a college audience in this community. Margaret Burroughs and her husband and I went to school at the University of Ghana in 1969. And I could go on as you were pulling his name, I was having flashbacks. We know so many people in common, or have met them. And you are, I'm serious about this work. You are a genius. Genius is something special that's never been done before. There are other great poets in the Black community, but you are one of them. And I'm a better off person from reading much of your stuff. I've read all of them, pretty much. I know what's happening. I know Black think and all of that. Thank you very much. The world owes you a debt, certainly the Black community. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Dorothy Mims, and I cannot believe that I had the honor of being in your presence today. I gave a shirt to a friend of mine who was a Chicagoan that says everything good about Black folks started in Chicago. And I didn't know the depth of the shirt that I gave him. And so now I will go back and tell him that I have substantiated it today from listening to you about the Black institutions that began there. And I just wanted to know if you knew Cyrus Parnell. So just to say that he was an incredible person who had a wonderful life ahead of him, and he quit it to make sure that Black children were educated for 50 years. And he was an institution himself. So thank you so much. He was a good friend of my mentor.
We sent our children to him. For them getting into college and university where he could be mentored by him. Yeah. He's a great man.
Yes,
Yes.
yes, all day. In the hood.
And I think I need to say just one thing most certainly before we leave. I don't hate white people. I tell the truth about white people. There's a profound difference. This came out in 90-something. And there's epigram in the book. This is 90s, okay? And I read this. He said, a well-educated Black has a tremendous advantage over a well-educated white in terms of the job market. And I think sometimes a Black may think they don't really have the advantage. But I've said on occasion, even about myself, if I were starting off today, I would love to be a well-educated Black because I really believe they do have an actual advantage today. Donald Trump. This was on race in America on NBC. All right. And I got two people who answered him. And one person said, this is a very dangerous statement, especially since it wasn't challenged by anyone. I said that. Then a Black student, female student said this, a rich white boy can say anything he wants to in this world, no matter how ignorant it is. So my calling card, a call, clarion call for all of us. I, at 82, knocking the hell out of 83. My brother at 90, knocking the hell out of 91. My sister at 90, knocking the hell out of 90, 91. We gotta keep going.
Yes.
You see what I'm saying? You cannot let these people bluff you, scare you. You know what I'm saying? You just gotta keep up, and then you gotta have young people with you. You gotta have young people with you. And you gotta challenge these people. All right. When I say challenging, I mean challenging. All right. And the reason I have such respect for Jewish people, and that's why I'm making a deep separation between Jewish people and Zionists.
Yeah.
All right. I've been to occupied Palestine. So what I write in Children for Gaza Children, I've seen it. I've been to Gaza. I've been to the West Bank. All right. I'm one of the few Black poets, writers who've been to 4 continents, who've been to over 10, 15 African nations, who met with 4 African presidents, all right, who decided very early, I'm not going to publish a book with white people. Why? Because I'm going to make this decision. Now, there's a profound difference between making a decision and making a choice. People who make decisions, you know what I'm saying? They do not make, see, that other people who make choices within the parameters of people who make decisions.
All right.
So we got to become decision makers. All right. And you cannot let these people get into your heart. You can't tell them everything that's on your mind. You know? They never tell us everything that's on their mind. And so it's very important for us to understand, yes, in America, there are good white people, no doubt about it. They're good white people. There's a problem with that. Some white people brought me here, good white people. I'm just leaving. But my point is that you cannot let that 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 good white people say that's the whole white race. No, that is not it. And we got to remember that when you leave here, the question from your children and your extended children, your cultural children, well, what did daddy do? My daughter is lesbian. I grew up homophobic. All Black men in this country grew up homophobic. Now the question is, how do you grow out of that? And I got a poem and talk about women. My daughter married her wife. Okay, I love both of them. I even love my daughter's wife almost as much as I love my daughter. I'm serious. Anyway, I stop that. But my point is that we got to grow. We got to grow. And I'll just end with this. We got to do that which is good, just, correct, and right, with a sense of history and understanding. Understanding essentially that we have to be an authority on something.
Amen.
Okay? And you don't have to be an authority on everything. So when I was coming up and we were building these institutional structures, the brothers used to come to me and say, hey, Haki, come on and do this with us. Come on and do this with us. I say, if I did all that, I couldn't get this done.
Right.
So, pick out 1 or 2 things. I used to go into the prisons all the time until the warden finally read Black men. And when I went to the prisons, I would ask the brother, how many of y'all got, Mother's Day cards? All the hands went up and said, cut up to mom. How about Father's Day cards? And if 2 hands went up, I'm exaggerating. We as Black men, I'm using Black intentionally, all right? We got to understand that we got to take care of our baby.
Come on now.
Yeah. We got to have our sons saying, my dad taught me this.
Right.
Okay? My dad taught me. So, you all have given me enough love to last me for a couple of days.
Before you go,
Oh, okay.
we got a little bit more love for you. I had to wrestle the microphone from him.
I'm small.
He said, do you got a question
or what is it? I said, it's neither. I said, I got a dedication poem for him. He said, all right, you get the mic. So today, your message inspired. Your message resonated and set our souls ablaze and broke our chains with fiery passion. Freedom speaks through the blazing fire. You stared in the face of oppression with no fear, so brave and defiant. You gave us our manhood and you taught us self-reliance. By any means necessary, the movement was ignited. You stood for a cause that our people are still fighting. Just like Malcolm X, a streak of lightning, who broke through the darkness, he challenged the Black people to see beyond the horizon, to go on your sword for your freedom if you're righteous. Thunderous roar of the lion. Thunderous roar of the lion. His words terrified his foes. Picture Black folks united. The oppressed versus the tyrant. David versus Goliath. We will not remain silent in the face of injustice. Thank you very much.
Because basically he done put me on Front Street now. He just wrote the poem. And it's wonderful, it's beautiful, you know what I'm saying? Let's go ahead and work on it a little bit more, and then send me a copy of it, all right? Seriously. And we need y'all to help us out, you know, go to thirdworldpressfoundation.org or look at our website and give donations to it. He said, we don't have no money at all.
Dr. Madhubuti, can I interrupt just real quick?
Yes, sir.
So I am Deacon Corey LaShawn Boyd. I'm a Senior Public Engagement Liaison with the Office of Governor Tim Walz and Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan. I'm a Black body male from Evanston, Illinois. I want to say thank you for your presence on behalf of the Office of the Governor.
Hey, give it my best. You know what? I really like one. Well, look. They should have had some chords in the campaign.
Yeah.
They should have had some chords in the campaign. He did not necessarily make, but the campaign made some serious mistakes. And we could have stopped that easily. All right, I'm gonna end with this poem on art. So I leave here with this passion and thanking, you know, everybody for bringing me out. And so if you know anything, you know I love children. That's why we put all our money and all everything in building these schools and then of course these books. I got a few catalogs left. I'm gonna be on. The poem is titled Art, and I'm gonna ask you to help me out when I get into the little poem. I want to thank my dear brother here. He's gonna make his mark. Okay. He's gonna make his mark. He's wonderful. And the questions were right on time. And I want to thank him for taking the time to sit with me and listen to this old man. Art is a prodigious and primary energy force. Children's active participation in music, dance, painting, poetry, film, photography, and indigenous crafts of their people is what makes them whole, significantly human, secure in their own skin, culture, and abilities, thus generating in them unlimited possibilities. Art is fundamental instruction and food for a people's soul as they translate the many languages and acts of becoming. Often tell them in no uncertain terms that all humans are not pure or perfect. However, the children of all cultures inherit their creative capacity to originate from the bones of their imagination. The closest manifestations of purity, perfection, and beauty are art. Art at its best encourages us to walk on water, dance on top of trees, and skip from star to star without being able to swim, keep a beat, or fly. A child's on fire imagination is a one universal prerequisite for becoming an artist. Help me out now. So magnify your children's minds with art. Jumpstart their questions with art. Introduce your children to the cultures of the world through art. Energize their young feet, spirits, and souls with art. Infuse the values important to civic culture and art with art.
Keep them curious, political, and creative with art. Speak and define the universal language of beauty with art. Learn to appreciate peace with art. Approach the cultures of other people through their art. Introduce the spiritual path of other people through their art. Keep young people in school off drugs and out of prison with art. Keep their young minds running, jumping, and excited with art. Examine the nurturing moments of love, peace, and connective differences with art. Art allows and encourages the love of self and others. The best artists are not mass murderers, criminals, or child molesters. They're in the beauty and creation business. Art is elemental to intelligence, working democracy, freedom, equality, and justice. Art, if used wisely, widely, early, and often, is an answer and a question. It is a cultural lake that the indigenous rivers of dance, music, local images, and voices flow. Art is the waterfall of life, reflecting the untimely and unique soul of a people. Art is the drumbeat of good and great hearts, forever seeking peace and a grand future for all enlightened people. But these are the people the world over who lovingly proclaim, "Give the artist some." Kind words, financial support, yeses from the heart, knowing intuitively that there will be creative reciprocity in all that they give us. Why? Because fundamentally, art inspires, informs, directs, generates hope, and challenges the receiver to respond. And finally, and this is consequential, the quality of the art determines the quality of the response.
Thank you, Dr. Madhubuti. Thank you, Chaun. Thank you so much. I need to thank some people before we go. I should the doors of this building lock automatically, so you in here now. But
This young man is old, but 14 years old. And he sit through this old man talking
on Saturday too. Thank y'all. Thank y'all. Thank you to the Creative Writing Department for their sponsorship to the Givens Foundation, that family that's been around for so long, nurturing Black writing and literature in this community. Thank you to them. More than my co-conspirators at In Black Ink and more than a single story. Thank y'all. The Givens collection has a mailing list. There's a sign-up sheet and a QR code back there for those of you who want to keep track of what we're doing. Again, events are how we activate this archive, but you ain't even seen the archive yet. Come on through it. Keep coming back. Be safe out there. Peace.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Back in book. Please.
I know.
It's the last thing. Yeah, I'm in the I don't get that. This is stuff that
Oh, wow.
Well, that's good. They're not his books necessarily, they're the third one.
Right, right. Okay. I know. Exactly. That's
You're at the university. Yeah. Oh, yeah. All right.
September 13th.
What's for you? I'm occupied. Hey, hey. How are you? Always a joy. I knew I was going to see you, and I was trying to be impress you in some way. Thank you. Homewood in Chicago or here? I'll take a look at it. Oh my goodness. How long will it be out? I'll be there. And when is the opening already took place?
February 8th.
Oh, I'll come. What time? Okay, I'll take a look. And if I don't see it, I'll get back with you. Did you send it by text or by email?
The opening isn't on here. I'll send you the details for the opening.
All right.
But the show opens on the 1st, but the opening is on the 8th.
All right. I'll keep that in mind.
Yeah, I'll send
I'd
you the
love to
details.
be there.
Yep. You honor some of the other
You're
people.
one of my favorite teachers.
This time someone honored you.
And the way that you help, like, help me pull back a little bit, like. No, that's important. I'll be back in a minute.
Oh, wow, that sounds amazing.
Hey, thank you.
Yes, evening, probably, what's the time for the Walker gig on the 13th of September? Maybe 7.
Oh, it'll be probably 7, 8 o'clock. Yeah, it's too late. We'll be the opening.
But our leader runs the law.
Almost there.
Oh, yeah. I'm glad you're back in town.
Yeah.
I know there's a lot, you know, finally met somebody in person. We were both back to DLC last night.
X, man, is that rosewood?
Some kind of wood that you're not allowed to cut down anymore. I don't remember it.
All the woods that it's probably rosewood. It takes a long time to grow.
All of those woods, you can't use any.
Yeah.
So it's going to sound different now.
Yeah. Yeah, JD Parent has a rosewood alto, I say contra alto clarinet.
So
I know it's worth more. It's worth a fortune now.
yep. So
We need space.
so Reggie, last week.
Yeah. Take it both.
Nicholson?
The receiver. Yeah. And then.
Yeah.
All of these are in the collection. I feel like
Here has been in the collection for a long time. All these, they come 2 days later. They sell 3 boxes and some posters.
And even with that, there are ways that we don't recognize things that work to our harm. And there's obviously levels. There are some places where how we move through. And so we won't recognize it necessarily. Obviously, the bigger potential harm is
You're not kind of the target.
We don't know this is our yet active and sometimes. Yes. Yeah. What's here? I got to I've been mostly avoiding. And I didn't one, but if I were to if you have to I'm trying to look for where is the right fit. It's still
I keep getting
Hey, how are you, man? How's the family?
Since spring, more
That's the energy, that's the spirit, that's the continuum. Oh, where's she going? Okay. Oh, fam, I didn't get to Nagasaki, but I lived in Yokohama for a year. Yeah. Oh, great place, great place, a lot of great things. Yeah, Nagasaki. I wanted to go to Nagasaki, but I went to a lot of places. Yeah. Okay. That's good. That's good. All is well.
Yeah.
Right. You're walking and talking. That's everything right now. Always. You take care. Yes.
No, it's I was taking your friend when she took me here. So we got here, we saw y'all going into the parking lot, just we were stopping y'all.
Oh, okay.
I would love a ride back if I can hitch a ride back. Hopefully going in the similar direction. I hope.
You never know. You never know. You said the bathroom is in the other building?
Downstairs. You
Go down the first floor. And take the elevator down, turn to your right.
Where are you now? Yeah. Yeah, glad you're here. These are all from third world press. Yeah. Sure.
I'm going to the bathroom.
All right.
All right.
I'm stealing your pen right now.
Oh, yeah.
All of these are from the things that from third world press. Are here in the. Yeah, it's wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's already Australia. They say 700,000 years. Yeah. It's very unique to them.
Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah. Hey.
I'm sorry. I was asking about that.
Yeah. It's a didgeridoo. Yes. Yes, sir. Thank you so much. It's so good to see you. And I'd like to come and visit so much. Let me take your phone number. Yeah. You don't know. Can I get you something?
Yeah, you already know what you already know.
No, I know that.
I know. It's like, it's the state. So you're sitting down. Because where do you jump in? You know,
Yeah.
Richard.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know you got a lot more to say. Yeah. But he did it. Come back.
You do?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I made a mistake. I don't.
Did you show her? I did. I showed it to her. No, no. Yes. It's a good years up. Before you arrived.
I'm looking at you. You take it in fresh air, it just doesn't interrupt the sound, but you learn how to do that. Aboriginals, I mean, they're not the only people that serve. Yeah, you know, they're incredible, you know, they set the instrument from 70,000 years ago. I mean, yes. Yeah, you know, they start, when you look at those, earlier, they show you the stuff from Spain. And those are babies. Yeah, those are babies. Hey, man. Hey. I ain't seen you. I know. I'm gonna look at you now. You got walking around with bags of money. I mean, you know, you never know what you might have to do, huh? But you might have to leave Earth. Indeed. I hear you. How you doing? Just too busy. No.
It's about not needing that.
Yeah. I heard you are. Yeah, burning. Hey. Oh, this is always good. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's right. That was many moved to this. Good to see you. And honor too. And then well, people are in front. You front, that means you back in. Oh, yeah.